When my son took everything from me, I didn't even cry. I just sat on my porch, holding the little blue cup he used to drink milk from when he was 5. It still had that tiny chip on the side. I used to tell him not to drink from that part, or he'd cut his lip. And that morning, when I realized I had nothing left, not my savings, not my home, not even his love, I held that cup and whispered, "Mama's still here." I think that was the only strength I had left. I'm 71 years old now. Retired nurse. Widow of 30 years. Mother of 1. My only child, Marcus. You know, people used to tell me I spoiled that boy. Maybe I did. But when you raise a child all alone, you try to give them the love of 2 parents. You try to fill every empty space they could ever feel. Marcus was my joy, my reason for waking up at 5 a.m. every day to walk to the hospital. The reason I packed double shifts, skipped lunches, and saved every dime in a small blue notebook. All I ever wanted was to make sure he'd never have to struggle like I did. I still remember his first day of school. He held my hand so tight, his little fingers shaking. "Don't go, Mama," he said, looking up at me with those big brown eyes. I smiled and said, "I'll be right here when you get out. I promise." And I was. For years I kept that promise. Every school recital, every game, every graduation, I was right there. I didn't have much, but I had pride, and that pride was in him. When Marcus got into nursing school, I thought, my baby followed in my footsteps. I used to dream of us working side by side, helping people, saving lives. But life doesn't always turn out like the dreams we hold close. It started small. He changed majors, said nursing was too hard. He wanted to do business. I didn't understand business, but I understood how much he wanted freedom. So I said, "If that's what you want, baby, I'll support you." That was the first time I dipped into my savings, a little envelope I'd kept inside my Bible. That money was supposed to fix the roof. Instead, it paid for Marcus's new start. He promised me he'd pay it back. He always promised. For a while, things were good. He'd come by on Sundays, sit at the kitchen table, and tell me stories about his big plans. He had a way of talking, full of dreams, full of spark. And I loved listening. Even when he didn't bring much more than talk, I still cooked his favorite food. Macaroni with too much cheese, and cornbread the way he liked it, crisp on the edges. He used to kiss my forehead before leaving and say, "You my good luck charm, Mama." That made me smile every single time. Then came the day he said, "Mama, I met someone." Her name was Tasha. Pretty girl. Sharp, polite, at least at first. She worked in real estate, he said. I thought that sounded good. Maybe she'd help him grow up a little, help him find stability. When they got married a year later, I felt proud. I wore a pale yellow dress, the same one I wore to church on Easter. I remember standing beside him in the photo, holding his arm. He looked happy, and I thought that was enough for me. I didn't know. That day I was standing beside the woman who'd helped take everything I had. After the wedding, Marcus changed. Little things at first. He stopped calling me as much, stopped coming by for Sunday dinners. When I called him, sometimes Tasha answered, and her tone was always polite but distant. "Oh, hey, Miss Evelyn," she'd say. "Marcus is busy right now. I'll tell him you called." She never did. I told myself, they're just starting a new life. Let them be. But deep down, I felt that ache, that kind you can't quite name. One afternoon, Marcus showed up with a folder in his hand. He looked nervous. "Mama, can we talk?" he said, standing in the doorway. I smiled. Of course, baby. Come on in. He sat down, rubbing his palms together. Mama, we're trying to buy a house. They said we need a little more for the down payment. Just a little more. How much is a little more, Marcus? He looked down. 20,000. I felt my chest tighten. That was almost everything I had in savings. Money I'd worked 35 years for. But I saw the hope in his eyes. And that hope, that was my weakness. So I said, all right, baby, I'll help you. That night, after he left, I sat by the window with my Bible in my lap. I prayed quietly, not for the money, but for his happiness. For him to build a life that wouldn't need me anymore. Because isn't that what every mother wants? When he bought that house, he called me crying. Mama, we got it! We got the house! And just like that, every worry melted away. Because I thought, he'll remember this. He'll always remember what his mama did for him. The years rolled by. Marcus and Tasha had their first child, my little grandson, Jordan. Oh, that boy lit up my world. Every time I saw him, I'd sing this little tune I made up. Jordan, Jordan, sunshine in my morning. He'd giggle and clap his hands. But as time went on, those visits became fewer. Then the calls stopped. And then, nothing. For months, I didn't see my son. When I called, no one picked up. When I texted, no reply. I started to wonder if I'd done something wrong. Then one day, he came by again. But this time, he wasn't smiling. He stood in my doorway, the same way he always had, but his eyes were cold. Mama, he said, we're having some trouble with the business. Tasha says we need to move some things around. We just need your signature on this paper. It's just temporary. I didn't understand the paper. All those words, joint account, transfer authorization, temporary access. But he said, it's just so we can handle the mortgage for a few months. Mama, I'll take care of everything. So I signed. Because I trusted my son. I didn't know that signature would drain my whole life. A few months later, my ATM card stopped working. I thought maybe it was a mistake. Then the bank called. Mrs. Harris, they said, your account has been emptied. Emptied. Just like that. I sat there on the couch, holding the phone to my ear, feeling my heartbeat in my throat. I asked them to check again. Maybe it was fraud, maybe a system glitch, but it wasn't. It was my son. When I called him, he didn't answer. When I called again, Tasha picked up. Miss Evelyn, she said, her voice flat. Marcus can't talk right now. We'll call you later. They never did. For weeks I cried myself to sleep. Not because of the money. I could have worked again somehow. But because of the betrayal. Because the boy I held through fever and fear had turned my trust into his tool. One night, I sat by the window, the same window I used to wait by when Marcus was out late as a teenager. Back then, I'd worry if he'd eaten, if he was safe. Now I sat there wondering if I even knew who he'd become. And in that quiet, I whispered to myself, Lord, if this is what it takes for me to learn peace, then let me learn it. But please, keep my heart soft. Because I knew if I let bitterness take root, I'd lose more than money. I'd lose myself. That was the day I decided to start again. Not because I had strength, but because I had to. I sold what little I had left, packed up my memories, and moved into a small apartment across town. It was quiet, clean, with sunlight that spilled in every morning through lace curtains. I started volunteering at the community clinic, not because I needed the work, but because I needed people. I needed laughter, stories, small talk, things that made me remember who I was before heartbreak. And yet even in that peace, a part of me still hoped Marcus would come back. Every time the phone rang, I thought, maybe it's him. Maybe he'll say, "I'm sorry, Mama." Maybe he'll come home. But months turned into years, and the boy I loved like the sun itself disappeared. Still, I prayed for him. Not for karma, not for punishment, just for truth, for him to see what he'd done and to remember who he was. Because sometimes that's the hardest thing life can do to you, make you face yourself. The first 6 months in my new apartment were the hardest. Everything felt smaller, quieter, emptier, but maybe that was what I needed. Peace doesn't always come in grand ways. Sometimes it sneaks in through cracked blinds and the sound of a teapot whistling. I kept my morning simple. 1 cup of tea, 1 prayer, 1 deep breath. That was my routine. It was how I reminded myself that life still had meaning, even if it had changed shape. Every Tuesday, I volunteered at the clinic downtown. They called me Nurse Evelyn, even though I hadn't worn scrubs in years. Mostly I took blood pressure, handed out medicine samples, and listened. That's what most people needed, someone to listen. There was a young woman who came every week named Rochelle. She'd sit on the exam table, shoulders tense, eyes tired. One day I asked, "You all right, baby?" She smiled weakly and said, "Just trying to hold life together." I nodded. I know that feeling. That's how we became friends, through shared silence and soft laughter. Rochelle reminded me of my younger self, trying, surviving, believing. Back at home, my little apartment began to feel warm. I filled it with things that made me smile. Thrift store mugs, a lace curtain, a potted plant I named Hope. I even hung up old photos of Marcus when he was small, before the money, before the pain. I know some people would have taken those down, but I couldn't. They reminded me that somewhere inside that grown man was still my boy, the one who used to run to me after school yelling, "Mama, look what I drew!" Every night before bed I'd whisper, "Wherever you are, son, I still love you." Because forgiveness wasn't something I did for him. It was something I did to keep my soul clean. One evening, I was closing up the clinic when Rochelle came rushing in, out of breath. "Miss Evelyn, you won't believe this." She handed me her phone, showing me a news article. At first I didn't understand. Then I saw the photo. Marcus. It was about his company, Harris Property Group. Apparently they were being investigated for fraud. Investors had lost money, loans unpaid, deals gone wrong. My heart went still. Rochelle didn't know he was my son. She kept talking fast. They say the wife was involved too. A bunch of fake listings or something. Ain't that wild? I nodded slowly, handing her phone back. "Yeah, baby," I said quietly. "That sure is wild." When I got home, I sat in the dark for a long time. Not angry, not even surprised. Just sad. You see, when people build things on lies, the walls always crack sooner or later. And sometimes the collapse is the only thing that makes them see truth again. I whispered a prayer for him that night. "Lord, don't let my child be destroyed, just broken enough to learn." Weeks passed. The news spread fast. Marcus and Tasha's business was shut down. Their house was under foreclosure. Neighbors who once praised them now whispered behind their backs. The shine was gone. But what hurt most was hearing how cruelly Tasha treated him once the money disappeared. She'd left, just like that. Packed her things, took their son, and vanished to another city. A neighbor told me later. I saw her leaving with boxes, didn't even look back. That night, I sat on my couch, tears quietly falling into my lap. Not out of revenge, but out of sorrow. Because even though he'd done me wrong, I still remembered that he was my baby, my boy who once needed me to tie his shoes and wipe his tears. About a month later, I got a knock at my door. It was raining, heavy, loud rain that blurred the streetlights. When I opened the door, I almost didn't recognize him. Marcus stood there, soaked through, shoulders slumped. He looked smaller somehow, not in size, but in spirit, like life had taken the fight out of him. "Mama," he whispered. "Can I come in?" For a second, I just looked at him. 1,000 memories rushed through my mind. Then I stepped aside. "Come in, baby." He sat at my little kitchen table, dripping rainwater onto the floor. His hands trembled. "I didn't know where else to go," he said softly. I poured him a cup of tea, the same brand I used to drink every morning when he was a boy. He stared at it for a while, then took a sip. "Mama," he said after a long silence, "I messed up." I didn't say a word, just let him talk. I thought I could make things big. I thought if I got rich, you'd be proud. But it all went wrong. Everything. The business, the house, Tasha. She's gone. She took Jordan. He looked up at me then, eyes red, desperate. They froze my accounts. I got nowhere to go. I can't even pay rent. I sat there listening, feeling the ache of a mother who's seen both sides of love, the giving and the losing. "Marcus," I said softly, "when you took my money, did you think about me?" His face crumpled. He started to cry. "I thought I'd pay you back, Mama. I swear I did. I just kept thinking one more deal, one more chance. I didn't mean to hurt you." I reached across the table and took his hand. It was cold, trembling, human. "Baby," I whispered, "you didn't just hurt me. You hurt yourself, but maybe now it's time to heal." He nodded, head down, tears falling onto the table. He stayed with me that night. I made him a bed on the couch, gave him a blanket that smelled faintly of lavender. He fell asleep fast, like a child after crying too long. I stood there in the doorway, watching him breathe. And for a moment, it felt like time rewound, back to when he was small, sleeping safe under my roof. Except now the roles were reversed. I wasn't angry anymore. I was tired, yes, but anger? Anger had no place left in me. I'd learned something. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting what someone did. It just means you stop carrying it like a stone in your chest. In the morning, I made pancakes, his favorite. He smiled weakly when he smelled them. "Mama, you still make the best pancakes." "Some things don't change," I said. And for a brief second, the air felt lighter. We ate quietly. Afterward, he helped wash the dishes. His movements were slow, careful, as if every act of kindness was a way of saying sorry. When he finished, he turned to me. "I'll find a job, Mama, I promise. I'll pay you back somehow." I shook my head. "You just focus on getting right with yourself. Money don't fix everything." He nodded, eyes wet again. Life found a strange rhythm after that. Marcus picked up work at a local grocery store. He'd leave early, come home tired, but at least he was trying. Sometimes we'd sit together in the evenings, not talking much. He'd help me with the dishes. I'd iron his shirts. Little moments, ordinary moments, the kind I used to pray for. One evening, he said, "Mama, I saw Jordan last week." I looked up from my sewing. "You did?" "Yeah, Tasha let me meet him at the park for an hour." "He's getting big," his voice cracked. He didn't remember me at first. I reached over and touched his hand. "It takes time, baby. Just keep showing up," he nodded. That was the first time I saw a bit of peace in his eyes. Still, Karma has its way of balancing things. A few months later, Marcus fell sick. Nothing serious at first, just fatigue, headaches. He thought it was stress, but when I insisted he go to the doctor, they found out it was high blood pressure, early diabetes, the kind that sneaks up after years of chasing too much, eating too fast, worrying too long. He sat beside me on the couch after getting the results, holding the paper in silence. Then he said, "I guess life's teaching me to slow down." I smiled softly. Life has a way of whispering first, then shouting when we don't listen. He laughed, a quiet, honest laugh. And in that sound, I heard something I hadn't in years: humility. From then on, our days were simple. We walked together in the mornings, cooked small meals, talked about things that weren't about money, like old music, recipes, the color of sunsets. Sometimes he'd say, "Mama, I wish I could take it all back." And I'd tell him, "You can't change the past, baby. But you can honor it by being better now." Then one afternoon, something unexpected happened. I got a call from the bank, the same bank that once told me my account was empty. "Mrs. Harris," the lady said, "I'm calling about a settlement related to the Harris Property Group investigation. You've been identified as a victim of fraud, and you're eligible for partial reimbursement." I almost dropped the phone. It wasn't much, a fraction of what I'd lost, but it was something. And somehow it came right after I'd stopped asking for it. That's how karma works sometimes. Quiet, unannounced, perfectly timed. That evening, I told Marcus about the call. He looked at me, tears welling up. "I don't deserve that, Mama." I smiled softly. "It ain't about deserving, baby. It's about grace. And grace don't check resumes." He covered his face and sobbed, deep, shaking sobs. I walked over, wrapped my arms around him, and whispered, "It's all right, son. We're both still here." I went to bed that night with a calm heart. For the first time in years, there was no bitterness between us, just quiet understanding. Sometimes the world gives you justice in ways you don't expect, not through punishment, but through peace. After the settlement, I thought maybe that was it, the closing of a long, painful chapter. But life wasn't done teaching either of us yet. It had a few more lessons hidden in quiet corners. Marcus started to change, not overnight, not dramatically, but gently, like how dawn creeps into a dark room. He woke up early every morning now, made his bed, took his medicine, went to work on time. He even started cooking dinner some nights. One evening, as I watched him stir a pot of beans, humming an old song, I felt something shift inside me, a soft, healing warmth I hadn't felt in years. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was forgiveness blooming again. Either way, I knew this was the man I'd prayed for. Marcus began going to church again, too. Not because I asked him to, but because he wanted to. One Sunday he came into my room while I was getting ready. He stood at the door, holding his tie awkwardly. "Mama," he said, "I forgot how to tie this thing." I smiled, walking over. "Oh, baby, come here. I got you." As I looped the fabric around his collar, I remembered all the times I'd done that when he was little. Back then it was for school. Now it was for a man trying to rebuild himself. "There," I said, patting his shoulder. He looked in the mirror, nodded slowly, and whispered, "Thanks, Mama." Something about that moment, simple as it was, felt sacred. Like God himself had paused to watch. At church, people greeted us kindly. Some remembered him from years back. "Marcus Harris. Ain't seen you in forever." He'd smile shyly, shake hands, and sit close beside me. During the service, the pastor spoke about grace, how sometimes God breaks us not to punish, but to prepare us for humility and wisdom. I saw Marcus wipe a tear from his cheek. He didn't say anything, but his silence said it all. Afterward, he whispered, "That sermon, it felt like it was for me." I nodded. Maybe it was. As weeks passed, he found a new purpose. He started mentoring young men at a community center. Boys who'd grown up without fathers, boys trying to find their way. When he told me, I just stared at him for a second. "You're helping other folks now?" He smiled. "Yeah, Mama. I figured I can't undo what I did, but maybe I can help somebody else not make the same mistakes." And right there, I saw it. Karma turning into kindness. Pain turning into purpose. One afternoon, I went with him to the community center. It was a small building with faded paint and a broken basketball hoop outside. Inside, a group of boys were laughing, tossing a ball back and forth. Marcus introduced me. "This is my mama, y'all, the strongest woman I know." The boys smiled shyly, saying, "Nice to meet you, ma'am." I looked around that little room, the cracked walls, the old chairs, and my heart swelled. Because this was something money couldn't buy, the sight of my son doing good. Later, one of the boys came up to me quietly. "Miss Evelyn," he said, "Mr. Marcus told us he used to mess up bad, but he changed." "Is that true?" I smiled softly. "It's true, baby. But more important, he kept trying. And that's what matters most." The boy nodded thoughtfully. "I want to be like that too." That's when I realized maybe everything that broke us had led us here, to helping someone else stand taller. One evening, I was sitting by the window, sewing a button onto one of Marcus's shirts, when the phone rang. It was Tasha. I hadn't heard her voice in years. "Miss Evelyn?" she said, sounding uncertain. "Yes, it's me. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. I shouldn't have gotten between you and Marcus. I was young and I let greed run my life." I took a breath. The old me might have been cold, but this new peace I'd found, it made me softer. "It's all right, Tasha," I said gently. "Life teaches us all. How's Jordan?" "He's good," she said, her voice breaking a little. "He's starting middle school. Marcus, he's been reaching out. I think it's time I let him see his son again." My eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," I whispered. "Tell him I'll call," she said quietly. When I hung up, I just sat there in silence, tears slipping down my cheeks. Because sometimes forgiveness circles back in the most unexpected ways. That weekend, Marcus went to meet Jordan. He was nervous, pacing the floor like a boy himself. "What if he doesn't want to see me, Mama?" "Then you wait," I said. "Love is patient, baby." He nodded, hugged me tight, and left. Hours later, he came back. I was in the kitchen washing dishes when I heard the door open. He didn't say a word, just walked in, smiling through tears. Then he handed me something, a drawing, crayon on paper. It said, "Me and Daddy," with 2 stick figures holding hands. I held it close to my heart. "Looks like he remembered you," I whispered. Marcus nodded, voice cracking. He said, "I missed you, Daddy. I didn't even know what to say." I smiled through my tears. "You don't gotta say much, baby. Sometimes just showing up is enough." From then on, life felt full again. Not perfect, but full. The kind of fullness that comes from healing, not having. Marcus saw Jordan every week. He'd bring him over sometimes, and I'd bake cookies or fry chicken like old times. The house would fill with laughter again, the kind I thought I'd lost forever. One afternoon, Jordan found the old blue cup, the one with the chip on the side. "Mama, what's this?" he asked. Marcus smiled, picking it up. "That's my cup. Your grandma kept it all these years." Jordan grinned. "Can I drink from it?" I laughed softly. "Not from the chipped side, baby." He giggled, just like his daddy used to. And for a moment, the whole world felt right again. As months passed, Marcus's health got better. His blood pressure stabilized. He smiled more. He even saved up enough to move into a small place near the park, close enough that I could still see him every week. One evening he took me there. It wasn't fancy, just a small apartment with sunlight spilling through the windows. But I saw pride in his eyes. "I got this on my own, Mama," he said. "I know you did," I replied, squeezing his hand. He looked around the empty room, then said quietly, "It ain't much." I smiled. "It's enough. Peace don't need big rooms." He laughed softly, nodding. That night, after he dropped me home, I sat by my window, the same spot where I'd once cried over his betrayal. Only now there were no tears, just gratitude, because life had done what I couldn't. It had humbled, healed, and rebuilt my son. Not through force, but through truth. And truth, I've learned, always wins quietly. A few months later, Marcus came to me with news. "Mama," he said, "the community center offered me a full-time job, coordinator for youth outreach. Benefits and everything." I covered my mouth, tears spilling out before I could stop them. "Oh, baby, that's wonderful." He smiled wide, eyes shining. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mama. You never gave up on me, even when I didn't deserve it." I reached out, cupped his face in my hands. "You were never beyond saving, Marcus. You just had to remember who you were." He nodded, eyes glistening. "I remember now." That night, I wrote in my journal, something I hadn't done in years. I wrote, "Sometimes, the people who hurt you most become the ones who teach you the deepest kind of love. The kind that forgives without forgetting, that lets go without bitterness. Karma isn't always revenge. Sometimes it's redemption." And with that, I closed my book, turned off the lamp, and let sleep come peacefully. Peace doesn't come all at once. It comes like small waves, soft, patient, washing away what used to ache. It took me years to learn that forgiveness isn't about letting someone back into your life. It's about letting the pain walk out of it. And that's what I started doing, day by day, one slow breath at a time. It had been almost 3 years since I lost my savings, my house, and my son, all in one stretch of heartbreak. By now, my life looked nothing like it used to, but that was all right. My apartment was small, but it had peace. A window that caught the morning sun. A quiet hallway. A little plant by the sill that somehow refused to die no matter how much I forgot to water it. I still volunteered at the clinic twice a week. The nurses there were younger, faster, louder, but they respected me. They called me Miss Evelyn like I was family. And when I laughed with them, it felt like life had quietly decided to give me a second chance. One Saturday morning, someone knocked. It was early, maybe 8 a.m., and I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, I froze. It was my grandson, Jaden. He was taller now, almost 16. His shoulders filled out, but his eyes were the same gentle brown I remembered. "Hi, Grandma." His voice cracked a little when he said it. I didn't speak right away. I just looked at him. All those years of silence, of empty holidays and unanswered letters, hung between us like fog. Finally, I whispered, "Hi, baby." He smiled, nervous, and held out a paper bag. I brought you something. My dad said you used to like these. Inside were warm cinnamon rolls from the little bakery that used to be down the street from my old house. I laughed quietly. You remember that? He nodded. Dad told me. And that's when I knew Marcus had been talking about me. After all that time, all that hurt, he hadn't erased me from his son's heart. We sat together in my kitchen, sipping tea and talking about school, sports, and music. He was shy, polite, a little unsure, like he was afraid of saying the wrong thing. Then he said something that made me set my cup down. Dad told me everything, Grandma. I blinked. Everything? He nodded. How he took your money. How he didn't call. How he left you when you needed him. My chest tightened. Oh, baby, you didn't need to. He stopped me. No, Grandma, I did. Because I wanted to know who you really are. And I think you're the strongest person I've ever met. That broke me in the softest way. Not the kind of breaking that hurts. The kind that heals. The kind that lets the light in through the cracks. I reached across the table, held his hand, and said quietly, Thank you, Jaden. That means more than you'll ever know. A week later, Marcus came by. He didn't call ahead, just showed up. When I opened the door, I didn't recognize him at first. He looked older, not just in his face, but in the way he stood. Shoulders lower, voice quieter, eyes tired. Hey, Mama. I nodded slowly. Hey, Marcus. We stood there in silence. The air was heavy, but not angry, just full of everything that had never been said. He finally spoke. I wanted to thank you for letting Jaden come by. I didn't know if you'd want to see either of us. I smiled faintly. You're still my son, Marcus. And he's still my grandson. Some things don't change, no matter what's happened. He swallowed hard. Mama, I know sorry don't fix it, but I am. I was stupid, greedy. I thought money would make me better, make me somebody. And all it did was make me lose everything that mattered. He paused. His voice trembled. You were right. Karma's real. I looked at him. My boy who once broke my heart, standing in front of me with tears in his eyes. And I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not pity, just understanding, I said softly. Karma's not about punishment, baby. It's about teaching. And I think you learned your lesson. I poured him a cup of tea, same way I used to when he was little. He sat at my table, quiet, his hands wrapped around the cup like it was keeping him grounded. We talked, really talked, for the first time in years. He told me about the job he lost, the house foreclosure, how his wife Lisa left him a year after the money was gone, how he'd started working part-time at the youth center, helping kids stay out of trouble. He said, You know what's crazy, Mama? I used to think helping other people was a waste of time. Now it's the only thing that makes me feel like I'm worth something. I smiled. Maybe that's God's way of bringing you back home, baby. Not to a place, but to yourself. He nodded slowly, eyes shining. Maybe so. Later that evening, he stood up to leave. Mama, he said, I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope one day you can remember me without pain. I looked at him for a long time. Then I said, Marcus, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means I can think of you and still feel peace. And I do. He covered his face with his hands and let out a shaky breath, half sob, half relief. I walked over, touched his arm, and said softly, You're still my boy. You always will be. After that day, Marcus started coming by more often. Not every day, just enough to remind me that family can heal, even if it takes a long, slow road. He'd bring Jaden sometimes. We'd cook, laugh, play old records, and sit by the window watching the world go quiet outside. And one evening, Jaden looked at me and said, "Grandma, you know what? You got the best smile in the world." I chuckled. "I bet you say that to all the grandmas." He shook his head. "No, just you." That night, after they left, I sat alone with my tea and thought about everything. About the woman who once cried herself to sleep, wondering how her own son could do that to her. About the nurse who had nothing left but kept showing up to help others. About the mother who learned that love doesn't always look like what you expect, but it's still love, even when it's broken. And I realized something. Karma didn't take anything from me. It gave me back what mattered: peace, clarity, and the quiet joy of watching my son become a better man through his own lessons. Sometimes life doesn't give you the apology you wanted. Sometimes it gives you the chance to build something better instead. Marcus never gave back the money, and I never asked him to, because what I gained meant more. He gave me honesty. He gave me time. And through him, I got to know my grandson, a young man who reminded me that kindness can skip a generation and still find its way home. Now every evening, I light a candle by the window. It's not for mourning anymore. It's for gratitude, for everything I lost that made room for what I have now. If you were to pass by and look in, you'd see a simple woman in a simple apartment, smiling softly at nothing in particular. And maybe you'd think she's lonely, but she's not. She's at peace. Because life, and maybe karma too, finally came full circle. If you ever lose something you thought you couldn't live without, remember this: sometimes what you lose is just clearing space for what you're meant to keep. I'm Evelyn, and this is how I learned that even when the world takes everything, peace always finds its way back home.